Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Now, 2024 is a very crucial year in regards to the fight against climate change. And, I probably expressed that at the beginning of 2023, but not all that we hoped to achieve or see last year actually came to fruition. So we are hoping that in 2025, I don't share this introduction with you again, that the platforms certainly are laid in 2024. The reason being, the Caribbean is perhaps one of the most vulnerable, if not the most vulnerable areas in the world that is affected by climate change. We're at the mercy of storms, of rising sea levels, of coastal conditions. Coastal erosion is affecting every island in the Caribbean. So part of the conversation as well is climate financing. An individual who has had the privilege and has actually made it his duty and responsibility to speak about such in attending the climate summits, at least over the last 10 years, is Mr. Steve Maximi. He's a special climate change advisor and climate smart agriculture and marketing expert. And he is with me virtually this morning. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thanks for that rather colorful introduction.
Mr. Maximi, thank you very much for joining me. I have a better understanding of what to expect in this conversation. Could you kindly inform us as to what a climate-smart agriculture and marketing expert is?
Well, you're looking at it. One version of it. Climate-smart agriculture has to do with the mechanisms that we in the agricultural sector have been mandated to conform or adapt to be able to survive climate change. It's quite simply, that's all it is. It is a means of surviving climate change and to be able to produce food and other products within this whole rubric of the climate crisis. Because I'm glad that you introduced the topic in the way that you did, in that we are in the middle of a crisis. I mean, it's no longer climate change, it's the climate crisis. And I'm not a purveyor of doom and gloom, but I'm in a position to make that statement with some veracity.
Mm-hmm. Now, the IMF has indicated that the adaptation or the investments that are needed in the Caribbean is about US $100 billion, or about 1/3 of its annual economic output. And that's where climate financing and advocacy has come into play as well. But Mr. Maximi, are you tired of having this conversation? I mean, as I mentioned in the introduction, it seems as though every year we start off with the same thing.
No, I mean, it's all about incremental changes. I mean, very few things happen all at once, all of a sudden. There are very few overnight successes. I think we are, in typical Caribbean fashion, it's this drop that's going to fill this bucket. And we are, well, I am part of the, this movement, if you like, that will get us to where we want to get to. Mm-hmm. Agree?
Fair enough. But what is
go ahead. Sorry. Maybe I can just put it into context. Look, we keep talking about climate finance and all of that, but really we need to come to the really base of the matter. We are in the midst of a climate crisis. Mm-hmm. Okay, what is this crisis about? Over several decades, the countries of the North have primarily been responsible for this global warming that we're experiencing. Everything that has happened since is a cascading effect from this global warming. And this global warming has been shown to be caused by the burning of fossil fuels and the fact that you have these greenhouse gases. Now, without getting into a climate change lecture, and the aspects that I'm interested in have to do with something called climate justice. Now, if we agree that this global warming thing has been caused by the industrialized countries spewing all of this carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, then there is a responsibility on their part to assist those of us who are being more affected. And as I said, without getting into a full climate justice lecture, let's just take a simple example. You're living in a neighborhood, and higher up the street from you, there's a company that is spilling plastic bottles, let's say, into the drain in front of your house. Now, sending 100 of those bottles down every day. It's clogging a drain. Your house is being flooded. So that, I mean, under normal circumstances, you would know that, okay, they're responsible. They should be doing something to alleviate the problem. But they've also noticed that your son threw one bottle into the drain. So now they're telling you that we have common but differentiated responsibility. What does that mean? It means that although I'm the major polluter, you are contributing as well. And that is how the international community deals with this attitude, with this aspect. So they are saying that we are all responsible, even though you are only producing, 1/2 of 1 ton of carbon dioxide per year or per decade. It doesn't matter. We are all responsible. So there's common but differentiated responsibility. And that means that we only have the moral authority to tell them to stop spilling plastic bottles into the drain if we stop our son from dropping a bottle into the drain. And that, in less than 2 minutes, is what all this climate justice and just transition talk is about. We are all responsible, although we recognize that the carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases that we are spewing into the atmospheric commons, because, I mean, when you spew carbon dioxide over Finland, it's the same as spewing it over Trinidad or over any other part of the globe. Mm-hmm. So I hope that was, as speedy an introduction to the aspect of the topic that we want to talk about today.
No, Mr.
If I've done a reasonable job of it.
No, it is a reasonable job, because what is going through my mind whilst you're mentioning that is that the United Nations considers the Caribbean to be ground zero for the effects of climate change. And
along with the Pacific, let's not be too,
Right, fair enough. But though, because we're speaking about small island developing states as a whole, but even if that is the case, and whilst I understand shared responsibility, are larger industrialized nations foregoing their responsibilities?
Well, we're not holding their toes to the fire sufficiently. I mean, as I said, it's an incremental process. It took us 28 years to get fossil fuels mentioned in the actual text of the agreement. I mean, that has been heralded as a big victory. But for those of us who have been, toiling in the vineyards, as it were, over the years, we are seeing these as incremental steps. Because let's not forget, my area of expertise is not climate finance in general. Mm-hmm. I'm specifically looking at climate finance in the agricultural sector, which is the one sector that I know a little bit about. So I can't make, overarching comments about this progress of COPs over the years, but I can tell you specifically about the agricultural sector.
Mm-hmm. So let's speak about the agricultural sector, because that is indeed one of the areas that the Caribbean has been focusing on in terms of the Caribbean's output, economic-wise. St. Lucia, for example, are one of the nations that focuses a lot, not only on tourism, but agriculture and agricultural exports to the European Union, for example. How has climate change affected agriculture and the ease of doing agriculture in the Caribbean?
Oh, well, I mean, the list is long, unfortunately. You mentioned in your opening salvo about sea level rise, but in terms of the impacts, you have these weather events, extreme events, and nowadays we don't really need a hurricane to disrupt the entire sector. You can have a deluge, just a stationary system that stays over your country, and it has happened in St. Lucia as well, where a stationary cloud just stays and dumps, literally tons of water onto an area. And there's no drainage system in the world that can handle that. Mm-hmm. So that is going to impact your agriculture. A lot of us are living in countries with serious slopes, and that type of deluge is going to result in the loss of topsoil. You're going to have all cascading effects down the road. The circulatory patterns have changed. I mean, in a recent visit to St. Lucia, I was speaking to a mariner, and this is one of these guys who work with yachties throughout the Caribbean, and they're saying that they're noticing changing wind patterns, and those changing wind patterns have also blown literally not just Sahara dust, but a whole suite of new diseases, new problems for us to deal with in the agricultural sector. So that without, as I said, getting into all the gory details, we can state categorically that we are being impacted And these climate change impacts, as I said, run the gamut from saltwater intrusion. So the Antiguans will know that looking at Potworks Dam, they recognize that what little fresh water is left in there is sitting on a lens of salt water. And that has been exacerbated by the fact that you have this sea level rise and this saltwater intrusion, etc. So that has made production, traditional production, extremely difficult.
And it sounds very expensive as well.
It sounds expensive to adapt. So when you hear talk about loss and damage, it is how you're trying to compensate these farmers, these producers, for issues that they have very little control over. And I think this is a point that we need to really, really sit down and deal with. This conversation about just transition, when you ask people to transition, to change from one way of operating to another, and it is not a change that has been jettisoned by their own efforts. So in other words, they are victims, as it were, of some external force or external situation that has them now scrambling, literally, to transition. And when we talk about a just transition, we're talking about just as an adjective, not as an adverb. So when you ask people to just transition, you want them to transition in a way that is just, meaning, righteous and all of that. You're not asking them to just transition as in just do it, as in the Nike slogan. So you're using just there as an adjective, and it has to do with climate justice. It has to do with the fact that the people who cause the problems should be the ones most responsible for correcting it. And how do they do that? By providing the producers with the goods and services to save themselves. Now, I want to be very clear on this, because this is where the conversation starts to get, sort of dicey. Mm-hmm. What we have to guard against is the people who cause the problems providing you with goods and services that appear to be grants, but is really, they're just double dipping. If I can be a bit graphic, do you mind if I?
No, please do, and explain, yeah.
If I come up with a more graphic example. Let's take this scenario. You're walking down the street, any part of the world, right? Somebody walks up to you and slashes you. I mean, in any type of jurisprudence, any type of political system, that is a crime. So you're going to seek redress in the courts. So, okay, so that's a justice principle. You say, okay, somebody slashed me. I was minding my own business. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't the aggressor. So you take them to court. And lo and behold, you're awarded a settlement. You said, for your reconstructive surgery and then it's going to cost $50,000 US. You get a settlement of $50,000 US. Only to realize that the person who slashed you is a surgeon, and you're now going to pay them that $50,000 to fix you up. So in other words, you're rewarding them for the types of problems that they cause. And that's what happens in the international community. Mm. So when you hear an industrialized country awards or grants a third world country, $1 million here, $1 million there, they don't get to put that $1 million into the central bank. They're going to take that $1 million and buy goods and services from the same perpetrators. And that is where people like me come in, because I want to ensure that the solutions are local solutions. So even if you slash me, I'm not going to take the $50,000 to pay you to stitch me up. I prefer to take the $50,000 and go to a local doctor to patch me up with, some sort of poultice made from aloes and so that I make sure that I don't complete the circle by sending the money back to the perpetrators. I hope I haven't been too graphic for 6 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Actually, I think you've been quite light considering all that we're facing down here. I think that's okay. But what I'm curious to know is whether or not that is a commonality in the Caribbean. Is that something that is taking place too often?
Unfortunately, yes. Even when we take what appears to be a simple term like climate smart agriculture, we as a Caribbean civilization, as SIDS, both here and in the Pacific, where I have had some experience as well. we are asking the people who cause the problems to help us solve it. And whilst I have no difficulty with that, we have to ensure that the solutions we get aren't rope ladder solutions. What do I mean by that? It's easy if someone has dug a pit, you fell into it, and then they came, ladder in hand, celebrating the fact that here I am, I'm here to save you, I'm here to help you. And then it turns out to be a rope ladder that they throw into the pit with you. I mean, that is of absolutely no use, because a rope ladder is only of significance if it's going to be attached firmly to the surface. So if you just throw me a rope ladder, that is of absolutely no use to me. And we have had those kinds of solutions, unfortunately, in the past, where the perpetrators, and I don't use that term lightly, the people who cause the problem, who are majorly responsible for the problems, are providing us with solutions that involve them. And that's where my difficulty comes in, right? I don't think we should be using whatever finance we are awarded. And remember, this is not just a grant. This is not out of the goodness of their heart. We have literally taken them to the court of public opinion or moral court, and we have been awarded these settlements. The last thing we need to do now is to take that same settlement and pay the perpetrators for getting us out of the hole. And as I said, I hope I'm not being,
No, not at all, not at all.
I'm really emotional about it. It's a very serious issue.
I want to go back to agriculture just for a moment and take a look at some examples. I know here in Trinidad and Tobago, specifically, for example, in the cocoa industry, cocoa yields year after year are declining to the point where local chocolatiers are saying we're not sure if we will be able to produce local chocolate very soon. It's already difficult as is. St. Lucia, for example, I don't know if you can, probably inform me on this. Is Panama disease something that we're seeing very common around the Caribbean in regards to banana products?
Panama disease has been with us from time immemorial. Panama and Moco was what really took us, when I say us now, I'm speaking as a Trini, not necessarily in exile, but a Trini that lived in Trinidad at the time. Panama disease is what got, and Moco disease is what got us out of the banana trade, and forced us into Lacatan, which is a particular type of a variety of bananas. But the real culprit nowadays, and when I say nowadays, I can speak with a fair amount of authority because I was on the board of WINFA. I was the only non-Windward Islander on the board of WINFA when we went through the fair trade era. So I was based in St. Vincent, so I have all the details on that. What really, as to use common parlance, what really licked us up was black Saratoga. We are accustomed to, well, I shouldn't say accustomed, but we knew how to handle yellow Saratoga. But when that new microsporella variety came in, and again, you can attribute that to climate change to an extent in terms of, the changes in circulatory patterns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That juxtaposed to the fact that the European Union, changed the trade regimes, and so that was the final nail in the coffin of the banana industry at the time. So it wasn't Panama disease; it was more black Saratoga.
But that's just one product of agriculture in the Caribbean. The thing is, as you mentioned, in regards to the availability of water, and you couple that with the extreme climate conditions. I believe in 2024, the Caribbean is supposed to experience a lot of heat waves, according to Outlook. And drought. Yeah. You couple that.
Look, you're getting me started now, because we scientists get excited when you come up with problems like that. I don't want the viewers to be unduly alarmed by my vicious response. The thing is that we have this. What I can tell you, from the scientific community, from the point of view of knowing what to do, we have this. What we don't have is the legitimate support. When I say legitimate support, not just at the economic level, but at the political level, where agriculture is seen as not a victim of climate change, and indeed not a villain, but the sleeping vanguard. I genuinely believe that agriculture is part of the solution to a host of the problems that you've just described. So I agree that we are going to be facing drought conditions, water shortages, but I'm in a position as someone who was part of the very first regional conference on, but not regional conference, workshop on climate change. And the two most important sectors at the time in 2002 was agriculture and water. And some of your older viewers may remember the name Lester Ford, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford was in charge of the water aspect of it, and I was in charge of the agriculture component. So that we have seen that link, we have understood the connection between water and agriculture for many, many decades. So I'm not worried about that at all. I think we have the wherewithal, we have the brain power, we have the experience, and we have the mechanisms to fund it. And that is how I'm going to throw back in climate finance. So that when you have politicians understanding, and this was the major outcome, as far as I'm concerned, of COP28 in Dubai, where I was lucky enough to be a participant, is this recognition that agriculture is going to be a significant player in your nationally determined contributions. And for the viewers who are not au courant with all of these acronyms, your nationally determined contributions has to do with your ticket to the Green Climate Fund. This is your entrance ticket. Mm-hmm. Every couple of years, each country that is a signatory to the GCF has to produce these NDCs. In other words, you are telling the international community, this is what I'm doing about my common but differentiated responsibility. This is how I'm going to reduce my greenhouse gases. And Trinidad has put it out. I mean, a whole lot of, all the countries who are signatories have put them out, but very few of them have stressed the importance of agriculture as a means of increasing your mitigation efforts. And that is where I come in, and that is where funding through the GCF for national adaptation plans, and I'm lucky enough to have been the person who wrote the Water and Agriculture National Adaptation Plan for Trinidad and Tobago through the FAO, and we're currently working on other aspects of ways of finding the finance to really make the difference within the agriculture sector. So this is a message of not just hope, but of an appreciation of the significance of what agriculture can do for climate finance efforts. And sorry for the plug there, but
no. But Mr. Maxme, I'm curious to know.
Once I get a soapbox, it's kind of hard to kick me off it. So
no. It's absolutely fine, because you see, the thing is, I'm also curious to note that if I were to be specific, throughout the conversation, we've spoken of the Caribbean in general, and we've identified some examples, St. Lucia, but coming back to Trinidad, do we actually understand and appreciate how agriculture is important in regards to climate change?
Let me take off my diplomatic hat and say we do, but whether that is translated into consistent, and I'm choosing my words carefully now, consistent action might be debatable. Now, at the level of the Ministry of Planning and Development and so, the Kishan Kumar Singhs of this world, I mean, I think they understand it. Where I'm not sure, and I'm speaking from a level of ignorance now because I no longer reside in Trinidad physically, although I'm doing a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but I do some work in Trinidad as well. So that I don't want to make definitive statements, but let me put it this way. When I lived in Trinidad up to like 2015, I can see that they didn't get it. And that's as clear and blunt as I can be.
Mm-hmm. Now, that being the case, given your experience, are there, what are some examples of governments around the Caribbean that have initiated some sort of action or are pushing or pressing for this change?
Okay, I think the example that will come up most forcibly would be St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Not only have they appreciated what climate smart agriculture, a genuine, comprehensive climate smart agriculture can do in terms of the NDCs, but I don't know if you mentioned it in the introduction, but I've been appointed, if you like, as the climate change advisor for the Minister of Agriculture in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Honorable Saboto Caesar, so that I accompanied him to COP. And I can tell you that as the pro tempore presidency of CELAC, for those of your viewers who are not, okra with all these regional groupings, CELAC is somewhat bigger than CARICOM because it includes a number of Latin American countries. And St. Vincent and Grenadines is the pro tempore presidency until March. And it was under that rubric that the Minister of Agriculture in St. Vincent and Grenadines appointed me as his climate change advisor. We went up to their conference in Dubai. And with that backing, if you like, because remember, but you may or may not know that Brazil and some of these larger countries are members of CELAC as well. So when you speak there as a representative of CELAC, you're carrying a fair amount of weight. So I can tell you that there are countries in the region, independent countries, and especially the OECS grouping. I mean, it is no accident that I now live in Grenada. I think it's common knowledge that the OECS took agriculture more seriously than we take it in Trinidad for a number of reasons, not least of which is the fact that, in terms of the contribution to GDP, and so it is not as significant as in some of the other countries. And that, as I said, without naming names and blaming blame, I think that would be a perfect example of one of the countries. Guyana would be another very significant one as well. Now I'm lucky enough to have worked and to continue to work in Guyana, over the last 3 decades or so. And I can tell you that they take it seriously, right? And with the new 25 by 2025 initiative, which, without boring your viewers, is part of our import substitution regime for CARICOM, where we are saying that we are going to replace 25% of the imports of food by 2025, which remarkably is next year. So if we're not cracking on it now, we have to get cracking on it soon. And I'm saying that all of this is tied up into our responses, and that have to be funded. And that is where climate finance comes in. Because I can put my head on a block and tell you that very little funding is available internationally that isn't tied to climate. And I'm not really subjecting myself to any correction on that. If you do not have a climate dimension to your financial proposals these days, it's dead in the water.
Well, Mr. Maxime, you weren't too graphic this morning, and I can tell you I look forward to further conversations in 2024, given what you've expressed.
Always available.
Given what you've expressed, certainly is a lot more to expand on, because I'm glad you mentioned reducing food imports by 25% in 2025. Well,
that's a bigger one.
Yeah,
that's a bigger one. That's a bigger one. That's not something you want to discuss before you have breakfast.
Certainly. Well, Mr. Maxime, thank you very much for joining me on AM Prime this morning, and we look forward to the future.
My pleasure, and Happy New Year to your viewers and listeners as well.
And to you too, sir. All the
and
very
then the
best.
First working Monday of the year.
Yes. For me, yes, the first working Monday of the year, indeed. Have a good one, sir. Take care.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot.
All the best.
Bye.
Mr. Steve Maxime joining me on the program this morning. Well, when it comes to speaking about climate change in the Caribbean, there are a number of factors, quite a number of factors. We were not able to get into all this morning, but I'm glad we were able to have this conversation because it sets the platform for more to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break on the program.